You live in a world where finding the love of your life isn't a problem because the government takes care of it for you. According to a law, the government chooses your spouse when you turn 16, which is great, except if you happen to like someone else. Just so you know, the solution is a harem. By the way, if you want to know the name of the anime, it will appear at the bottom during the video. Just leave the minute it appears, and you'll win a heart. The anime starts by telling us that, as hardly any children were being born in Japan, they decided to implement a law where 16-year-old boys and girls would be married by government order. Yes, folks, you heard that right. At 16, the government takes care of finding you a partner and marrying you. The law that established these kinds of marriages is called the Yukari Law, and it came into effect in 1975. Since then, statistically, more children have been born in Japan, which is what the government wanted. However, there was one boy who didn't agree with the government deciding who you marry when you turn 16. That boy is our protagonist, Najima. We get to know him in the next scene, sitting at his desk, where we also meet a classmate of his name Takeda. Takeda has just received the government's order indicating that his marriage has been arranged and that he will meet his partner soon. However, Takeda is quite the playboy and says he doesn't want to get married so young because he wants to keep enjoying his fleeting teenage romances. So, he expresses to the protagonist that he disagrees with a law that forces you to marry so young. Since the protagonist and the other boys around don't agree with the law either, they decide to form an anti-marriage group, swearing that none of them will marry by government order. And well, during the oath, the protagonist realizes that a girl named Takazaki, who is basically his crush, has joined them. If the government ordered him to marry her, he would accept without hesitation. But even though the protagonist is very much in love with Takazaki, he has never dared to tell her anything. Time is running out because if either of them receives the government's marriage letter, they will be obliged not to fall in love with anyone else. Since the protagonist's 16th birthday is tomorrow, he knows he has to propose to Takazaki that very day. If he waits another day, his letter will arrive, and he will have no other choice. When the protagonist arrived at school, he went straight to Takazaki with the intention of proposing to her. But no, folks, it didn't go well. The girl didn't even recognize the protagonist. So, in the end, he didn't propose anything because when he told her his name was Najima, she asked where she knew him from. Even though the protagonist had a special memory with her from when they were little and went to school together, she apparently didn't remember him. So, he was really sad, but knowing he had nothing to lose and that it was his last chance, he decided to ask her to meet him at the park at 6 p.m. After that, he ran off. I know it's not the best way to ask for a date, but at least we can recognize that the protagonist is trying. However, the protagonist was at the park right on time at 6 p.m. and the girl didn't show up. It was 8:30 p.m. and she still wasn't there. By 10:30 p.m., she still hadn't arrived. Since it was night, some police officers told the protagonist he should go home. As he was leaving, Takazaki appeared behind him. I think showing up 4.5 hours late isn't great, but at least she showed up. They went to sit on a bench, where Takazaki reminded him of an anecdote they had at school. So, the girl actually did recognize the protagonist when he invited her, but she decided to lie because, well, I don't really know why she lied, but the fact is she did recognize him. Realizing that Takazaki remembered him, the protagonist gained courage and confessed his love to her. After he did, we saw that the girl started crying. No, she's not sad that he told her he likes her. Her tears are of joy because she confesses that she likes him too. Yay, love wins. Since they both like each other, they hugged and kissed right there. Just when the protagonist was about to propose marriage, he received a notification on his phone indicating that since it was already midnight and he was turning 16, the government had found his new partner. When the protagonist nervously read the email, he saw Takazaki's name and got really happy. However, his phone immediately died, and government officials arrived with an envelope containing the name of his new partner, which had a different name. Even though the protagonist protested, saying the email stated his partner was Takazaki, the officials said that the decision in the envelope is what counts, and there was nothing he could do about it. Confused, the protagonist tried to console Takazaki, saying it must be a mistake. But no, Takazaki thought the phone thing was a lie and, accepting that the protagonist would marry someone else, wished him luck and said goodbye. But no, the protagonist wasn't going to let her go, so he chased her, hugged her, and said he would find a way to fix everything. However, the next day, his parents informed the guy that he was obligated to meet his future wife. Although he preferred to go to class instead of the meeting, at school they told him he couldn't be there because the meeting with his future wife was more important than classes. In a desperate maneuver to avoid attending the meeting, the protagonist locked himself in a classroom. There, he spoke with Takasaki, who told him to forget about them, that it was something that wasn't going to happen, and asked him to go to his meeting since it was an obligation. After hearing this, we see the guy going to the meeting with his future wife. When he saw her, he realized the government didn't have bad taste. In other words, the waifu was really cute. Her name was Rurina. Seeing the protagonist sitting there with a dumb look on his face, ignoring her, she threw her sweater at him, told him she wouldn't marry him, and stormed out of the room in a huff. Even though the protagonist didn't want to marry her, he went after her to apologize for ignoring her. Despite ending up in a rather nonsensical scene where they ended up on top of each other, the protagonist managed to apologize and explained that he was ignoring her because he was thinking about his crush. Hearing this, Rurina got interested in knowing who the protagonist's crush was. So, he told her all about his history with Takasaki, concluding that Takasaki told him she didn't want anything more to do with him. But then, Rurina, after learning about the whole drama between Takasaki and the protagonist, offered to help him win Takasaki back. Yes, folks, you heard that right. The protagonist's wife is going to help him get with another waifu. But first, to please their parents, they decided to pretend they accepted each other, which is why they went out holding hands to be seen by their parents. The next day, we see the protagonist at school, where some excited classmates start saying that his wife is very pretty. Takasaki overhears this, but says she's not interested, although we all know she actually is, but just acts tough. Shortly after, during break time, a waifu informs the protagonist that his wife fainted during physical education. So, he went to see her in the infirmary. There, we learn that her fainting was due to an illness she has had since childhood, but apparently, it's not something to worry about. Instead, they started talking to get to know each other better. We find out that Rurina, despite being very good in class, is very bad at socializing. In fact, she says she doesn't have friends because she's very shy. She only talks to the protagonist because the government practically forced them to pair up. Well, you have to start somewhere. Later, we see the protagonist and Rurina leaving school together. Rurina asks the protagonist to keep telling her about Takasaki, and as Takasaki was walking behind Rurina, the protagonist told the waifu to turn around so she could see who she was. Once Rurina knew who she was, she went to introduce herself, saying she was the protagonist's assigned wife, and invited Takasaki to grab a drink to talk about it. At the cafe, Rurina told Takasaki that even though she was the protagonist's assigned wife, she didn't like him. So instead, she asked Takasaki if she liked the protagonist. Rurina doesn't beat around the bush. She says things straight up and without a filter. Takasaki confessed that she did like the protagonist a lot, especially his messy hair, which I think isn't Nejima's best attribute, but if the waifu likes it, I wish her the best of luck. After spending some time talking about the protagonist, the waifu said their goodbyes. The protagonist asked Rurina how it went, but then noticed that the pink-haired girl was crying. This was because, after the conversation with Takasaki, she had made her first friend. In the emotional moment, the protagonist confessed to Rurina that he had kissed Takasaki. Upon hearing this, Rurina asked the protagonist to try kissing her again, as she was in love with him. So, to help make the kiss happen, Rurina invited the protagonist to her house, where Takasaki was also present. Of course, neither of them knew the other would be there, so when they met, it was an awkward moment. Takasaki said she would leave to avoid interfering between the protagonist and his wife, but no, Rurina said that she and the protagonist didn't like each other, so Takasaki could stay without feeling uncomfortable. Soon after, Rurina, as we know, has no filter and decided to ask the protagonist and Takasaki to kiss. Yes, folks, just like that. Takasaki went to the bathroom, and meanwhile, the protagonist complained to Rurina about being so direct. But when Takasaki came out of the bathroom, she said she would do it. We see her approaching the protagonist with the intention of kissing him, but then the guy had a small anxiety attack, so the kiss couldn't happen. Takasaki said she had to leave, so no kiss because of Nejima the buzzkill. However, when Takasaki was saying goodbye to Rurina, she asked if she felt jealous when she was about to kiss her husband. Rurina said she didn't feel even a little jealous, but Takasaki said she would probably start feeling jealous soon and encouraged her to give the protagonist a chance since they were destined to be married. After Takasaki left, Rurina was very excited about the almost kiss between the waifu and the protagonist. She asked the protagonist to kiss Takasaki every day, once a day. The protagonist didn't understand why Rurina was asking this now. The next day, the guy ran into Takasaki in the school hallway and mentioned that his wife asked him to kiss her once a day, every day. Takasaki agreed, and we see her kiss the protagonist, not just once but several times. One of the protagonist's friends, Nisaka, saw him cheating on his wife. In the next scene, we see Nisaka passing by the protagonist in the classroom. The protagonist asked Nisaka to sit with him for a while, but Nisaka said he had an important meeting and would come back and sit with him later. After a a while, Nasaka returned to the classroom to sit with the protagonist, but the protagonist had fallen asleep. In a somewhat dark scene, Nasaka kissed the protagonist while he was asleep. When the protagonist woke up, Nasaka was a few tables away. The protagonist asked if Nasaka liked Takasaki because he thought they would make a good couple, but Nasaka said he didn't like her. Based on that earlier kiss, it seems like Nasaka might actually like the protagonist. But let's keep watching the anime to see if that's the case. For now, in the next scene, we head to the protagonist's house. He's there with his wife and parents, and since they're in front of their parents, they have to pretend to be a loving couple. But once they're alone in their room, Rurina takes the opportunity to ask the protagonist about Takazaki. Yes, people, I don't understand why, but Rurina is super interested in Takazaki. She asks the protagonist if he kissed her like she had asked him to. The protagonist says he did, but Rurina isn't satisfied with this and asks if Takazaki enjoyed the kiss. Well, the protagonist has no way of knowing if Takazaki enjoyed the kiss because he didn't exactly have time to ask her. At that moment, Rurina throws herself on the protagonist, creating a rather thrilling friction between their bodies. However, this close moment is interrupted when two government agents arrive to talk to the protagonist and Rurina. The reason for the visit from these government agents is to inform the protagonist and Rurina that the marriage pairings they make are based on various personality studies, which have a scientific basis backing the success of the relationship. So, the fact that they paired the protagonist with Rurina is because studies showed they were compatible. To demonstrate this compatibility, the government workers start asking them some questions. After the questioning, the agents leave the house. However, one of them mentions they will visit Takazaki's house next, which makes the protagonist feel really sad as he thinks they will assign a partner to his waifu. Fortunately, his wife cheers him up, telling him not to give up hope as there's a chance the agents might be referring to a different Takazaki. The next day, the protagonist goes to talk to Takazaki, asking her if the government agents visited her house yesterday. The waifu says yes, which makes the protagonist really sad, and he wishes her happiness with her new partner. But no, the waifu clarifies to the protagonist that although the government agents did visit her house, they weren't there to assign her a partner, but because they have business with her family. So, hearing this, the protagonist feels alive again and eager to kiss Takazaki once more. Later, when the protagonist is back home, he receives a call from Rurina. She tells him she invited Takazaki to the camping trip they will have with their parents. Feeling that he won't be able to handle the pressure of dealing with two waifus alone, the protagonist asks Nasaka to join the trip. Although Nasaka initially says no, after the protagonist begs him 300 times, Nasaka finally agrees. So when the day of the trip arrived, we see the main character meeting Nasaka at the terminal, where shortly after, Takazaki and Rurina arrive. Truth be told, Rurina wasn't happy to see the main character had invited Nasaka, but in the end, she had no choice but to accept it. They all boarded a bus, and after an uncomfortable journey, they reached the camping site. The waifus went off on their own, leaving the main character and Nasaka in charge of cooking. Turns out, Nasaka is pretty good at preparing food, so after a while, dinner was ready. The main character went to fetch the waifus to eat, only to find them both in swimsuits. He preferred to hide, but they spotted him anyway. As Rurina was about to ask him to stop being shy and come out of hiding, she ended up slipping and twisting her ankle. The main character had no choice but to come out of hiding and carry his wife back to the cabin. During the walk, Rurina started feeling a bit flustered because the main character's hands were touching sensitive areas of her skin directly. She asked him to leave her on a bench, claiming she felt better, but it was just an excuse to stop being touched, as later her father had to bandage her swollen ankle. After this, everyone went to their sleeping spots. We see the main character and Nasaka sharing space, and there the main character suspiciously approached Nasaka to ask if he's hiding something. The main character's question relates to his belief that Nasaka likes Takazaki, but Nasaka thinks he's referring to the strange incident in the classroom where he almost confessed his feelings but was interrupted by the waifus, who asked them to leave as Rurina had organized nighttime walks in pairs. She went with Nasaka so the main character could be alone with Takazaki. They were seen walking hand in hand like lovebirds, but Takazaki slipped and fell down a cliff, dragging the main character with her. In the fall, she ended up in a very provocative position and hugged the main character for company. On the other hand, Nasaka told Rurina he figured out her plan to pair the main character with Takazaki, warning her that doing so violates the government agreement and could get them in trouble. This left Rurina thoughtful, and she avoided the topic by chasing fireflies, where she coincidentally found the main character and Takazaki embracing suspiciously. After they all reunited, they chased fireflies together and held hands as if they were all couples. The camping trip ended, so we see the main character and Nasaka back at the terminal. Nasaka tells the main character that regarding what they were discussing before being interrupted by the waifus, all he'll say is sorry. This is the typical case of of romantic confusion. With that apology, the main character believes Nisaka actually likes Takazaki, when in fact, his apology is for kissing him while he was asleep, something the main character doesn't even know happened. The next day, as the main character and Takeda walked through the school halls, a teacher informed them that since they both have been assigned partners, they must attend a conference at the ministry. Shortly after, we see the main character arrive at the ministry, where Takeda seems quite happy with his assigned wife, despite having previously claimed he wouldn't marry anyone. But well, people change their minds, and that seems to be the case for the main character too, because although he said he didn't want anything with Rowena, when he saw her arrive with her hair done nicely, he started feeling butterflies in his stomach and complimented her, saying her new hairstyle looks very good on her. After this, they went to the meeting place, where we see a government worker giving the talk, which is about nothing more and nothing less than intimate education. Yes, folks, the reason for the meeting is to discuss with the couples the benefits of intimate relations. Well, faced with the topic, both the main character and Rowena blushed, but not only that, the conference speaker started showing graphic examples on a projector, which made the main character, Rowena, and everyone in the room quite heated because they were practically watching an adults-only movie. Well, these folks from the ministry are something else. It's clear they're desperate to ensure the spouses don't disrespect each other. So shortly after, they locked the main character with Rowena in a room where they even prepared condoms beforehand. Goodness, those people from the ministry are too much. Well, the main character was a bit shocked because he didn't know whether to take the step or not, but eventually, he decided to make a move on Rowena in a rather forward manner. There, with Rowena so close and noticing that she wasn't resisting, he began to kiss her. Well, they just kissed. Things didn't escalate further because Rowena pulled away and asked the main character why he kissed her when he supposedly likes Takazaki. To this, the main character confesses that he heard they would be penalized by the government if they didn't, and that government agents would find out because they had placed cameras in the room. But no, Rowena tells the main character that what he heard is a lie because recording them is illegal, so the government wouldn't have a way to know if they did it or not. Besides clearing this up for the main character, Rowena wasn't very happy that he kissed her. After a shy complaint, Rowena left, and these two ended up a bit distant because they almost crossed a line, so it's best for her to keep her distance from the main character. That's why we see the main character a little sad because his wife is mad at him, and well, deep down, he didn't want to put her in that uncomfortable situation either. He just got carried away by the atmosphere of the test. Later, when the boy goes to school, he manages to distract himself a bit by seeing Nisaka performing a joke, which reminded him of Rowena, but he didn't write to her because they were fighting. Instead, he decided to take out a charm she gave him to remember her, but then the charm slipped from his hands, and when he went to retrieve it, he accidentally hammered his hand. I know, folks, that sequence is really weird, but that's what happened. So now the main character had to go to the nurse's office to have his hand bandaged, and then Takazaki arrived, very worried about the main character's health. After seeing that the main character's hand wasn't that bad, Takazaki realized the boy wasn't in the best mood, so she asked why he was sad. To this, the main character told her that he did something Rowena didn't like. She got mad, they're distant, and he misses her. Upon hearing this, Takazaki decided to arrange a snack with Rowena to speak well of the main character and basically get her to forgive him. Even though Rowena admits she still doesn't forgive the main character for what he did, the truth is she misses him too. On the other hand, the main character is wandering the school halls, where he meets one of the government envoys, so he decides to ask for advice on how to mend his current situation with his wife. To this, the government official basically tells him to stop being stupid, apologize, and everything will be back to normal. Of course, with such advice, the main character lifted his spirits a bit, but he became even more cheerful the next day when he woke up to find a letter from Rowena saying she forgave him and encouraging him for a festival he must participate in. So Najima went happily to school, and meanwhile, now it's Takazaki who's feeling a bit sad because she foolishly reconciled Rowena with the main character when she knows she likes him herself. So, the protag is at school, collaborating on rehearsals for the upcoming school festival, and in one of these, he meets Takazaki, who asks him about his hand. The protag tells her everything is fine, and later on, we find out that Takazaki is practicing to play Romeo in one of the festival plays. Was it necessary to invert the genders? I don't know. Anyway, Nisaka doesn't seem very happy about being cast as Juliet, so out of frustration, we see him leave school, prompting the protag to chase after him to convince him not to quit the play. The protag believes the reason for Nisaka's upset about assuming the role of Juliet is because eventually he'll have to dress as a woman. But well, that's not the real reason Nisaka is upset, and Nisaka doesn't want to tell the protag the reason either. In the midst of this, Nisaka pushes the protag away as he doesn't want to talk about it, and just then, a character with hair covering their eyes appears on the scene, intending to scold Nisaka for being rude to the protag. Well, this character feels entitled to scold Nisaka because he's his father. Yes, folks, as strange as it sounds, the one with the hair covering his eyes is Nisaka's father, even though they seem to be the same age. But well, Nisaka's father invited the protag to dinner to make up for his son's rude behavior. And during the meal, since Nisaka didn't apologize personally, his father did so on his behalf. After finishing the meal, Nisaka and the protag were on good terms again, but the protag continued trying to convince Nisaka to be Juliet. Well, I find the protag's fixation on Nisaka being Juliet a bit weird, but in the end, he managed to convince him, so the next day we see them measuring his chest to design the costume. On the other hand, we see the protag congratulating Takazaki for getting the role of Romeo. By the way, on that topic, the waifu confesses to the protag that the teacher in charge of the play had asked her and Nisaka to kiss, but they both refused because they don't like each other. Well, Takazaki, and I think Nisaka too, likes the protag. So when they were alone in an alley, the waifu couldn't hold back anymore and let out her frustrated feelings, saying that no matter how much she loves the protag, they can never be together because the government dictates otherwise. Well, faced with Takazaki crying in frustration, the protag approached to give her a comforting hug, because when someone cries, you should always hug them. Sometime later, we see the guy at school distributing flyers for everyone to come see the Romeo and Juliet play his class organized. In that moment, Takazaki is dressed up as Romeo. I still insist that it would have been better to dress the guy as Romeo and the girl as Juliet, but oh well, that's how things are done at that school. Anyway, as the protag admired Takazaki from afar, he saw some old schoolmates arriving to watch the play. Since he didn't get along with these waifus, he decided to run off to another place, where he ran into the government agent, who spends more time at school than at the ministry. But at least his presence helped the protag ask if he had found out about the mail. You see, the protag had asked the government agent to investigate the mail that said his partner would be Takazaki. However, the government agent said he checked the files and his assigned partner was indeed Rurina. However, he also realized that someone had sent him a fake email pretending to be from the ministry and saying that his partner would be Takazaki, which is quite strange, but it was just a false alarm. After this, the protag went to the second floor of the school to continue distributing flyers and then met his wife, whom he had not seen in person since their little argument, so both were nervous and could not talk much. The protag just handed her a flyer, and the waifu kept going straight to the auditorium. And well, faced with that strange encounter, the protag thought maybe his wife was still mad at him, but then he saw Nisaka pass by, so he went to ask him why he wasn't dressed for the play yet. Of course, Nisaka told the protag to chill out, that he was actually on his way to the dressing room to change, so the protag accompanied him, stayed on the other side of the curtain chatting with Nisaka, and when Nisaka came out, he looked just like a girl. Like, Nisaka actually looked like a woman dressed like that. Now I understand why they chose him as Juliet. So a while later, the protag went to the auditorium, where the Romeo and Juliet play began and proceeded normally. I mean, we've all seen the story of Romeo and Juliet in school, so I won't narrate it. Just know that Nisaka looked like Angelina Jolie, and Takazaki was acting like Brad Pitt, and that's enough. After the play ended, the protag was leaving when he ran into one of his old schoolmates he had previously avoided. This waifu's name is Igarashi, who tells the protag that she knows about the matchmaking mail and that actually, what the mail said was true, so the protag's true partner is Takazaki. Well, Rurina happened to overhear this as she was spying, and now Rurina, the protag, and all of us want to know what Igarashi means by saying that the protag's true wife should be Takazaki. But well, Igarashi refused to spill the whole gossip and left us hanging. Right then, Rurina took the opportunity to ask the protagonist why he hadn't told her that he had received an email informing him that Takazaki would be his partner, before he received the letter saying it would be her. To this, the protagonist says he didn't tell her because the email turned out to be fake. And so, without realizing it, Rurina and the protagonist made amends. Now that they were speaking again, they went to the locker room to congratulate Takazaki on her great performance. Shortly after, Nisaka appeared, whom they also congratulated. That's when Nisaka's brother showed up, mocking the dress they put on his brother. Nisaka retaliated, and the scene culminated with Nisaka's father inviting the protagonist and the waifus to Nisaka's brother's wedding. Before heading to Nisaka's brother's wedding, Rurina and the protagonist met with Igarashi because leaving them in such suspense was driving them to the brink of collapse. Although Igarashi refused several times to say why she claimed Takazaki is the protagonist's true wife, she finally started telling the story from the beginning. It goes back to when they both studied together in school. At first, Igarashi felt a bit envious of Takazaki because she was popular and Igarashi was not. However, as she got to know Takazaki, she realized that Takazaki was a good person. In fact, she learned about the love Takazaki always felt for the protagonist. Knowing that Takazaki's love for the protagonist is pure, she is convinced that the protagonist's true love is Takazaki, regardless of the government pairing him with Rurina. At this point, a government agent appears to scold Igarashi for questioning the government's matchmaking system. But Igarashi isn't about to let a government employee scold her, so she left. The protagonist then asks the gray-haired man if he knows Igarashi. Indeed, the government agent tells us that Igarashi is related to one of the ministry's bosses. That's That's why he's seen her at the government agency, where they've had their differences because Igarashi disagrees with how the government is pairing up the boys and girls. Furthermore, as Igarashi is not only related to one of the ministry's bosses, but also a kind of genius, some are considering putting her in charge of the matchmaking system when she comes of age. That's why she feels entitled to voice her opinion on the pairings as well. Afterward, the protagonist and the other three main characters of the anime went to Nasaka's brother's wedding as planned. At one point, they were approached by one of the wedding organizers who, upon seeing the two waifus, invited them to her advertising agency after the wedding to do some bridal modeling. She's looking for young waifus for a campaign she's planning, and since the waifus want to dress up as brides, they decided to accept the proposal. But before they could go for the modeling, they needed to attend Nasaka's brother's wedding. They saw him enter the ceremony hand in hand with his wife, receiving applause from the entire audience. As part of the protocol, the minister who sent them the pairing notice 4 years ago told the story of the couple getting married today. During this, the protagonist started thinking that when he gets married, he'll have to listen to his life story with his partner, and he imagines it with Takazaki, not Rurina. On the other hand, at the table, we see the waifus also fantasizing about their respective stories for when they get married. Lost in thoughts and daydreams, the ceremony ended and everyone gathered around the flower bouquet. However, the protagonist felt he had left his cell phone in the auditorium, so he went back to retrieve it. There, he found Takazaki lying on the floor crying because the wedding ceremony had made her sentimental. Now she's thinking she wants to marry the protagonist, which is currently impossible since Najima has a partner. Nevertheless, the protagonist didn't leave her hanging and kissed her. Rurina saw the kiss, and although she didn't seem pleased to catch them, she was the one who asked the protagonist to kiss Takazaki every day, so she can't complain now. After this, we see the protagonist return home, somewhat regretful for playing with the feelings of two waifus at once, but nothing a trip to the hot springs with his family and wife can't fix. They had fun together, and although Rurina occasionally remembered the image of the protagonist kissing Takazaki, she couldn't complain since she was the one who suggested it. So they spent the rest of the day happily together. By nightfall, they realized their parents had booked them a bridal suite. However, the idea of sleeping in the same bed didn't bring good memories to either of them, so they decided to sleep in separate beds. In the middle of the night, Rurina got up to tell the protagonist that she had been thinking a lot and had come to the conclusion that the best thing she could do is marry Takazaki instead of herself. Clearly, when the main character heard this, he looked puzzled because even though that was the plan from the beginning of the anime, actually managing to annul their engagement seemed impossible. But hey, Rurina says she's been investigating, and there's a way for the government to annul the engagement. Government agents must confirm for 6 consecutive months that the relationship isn't working out. So, to dissolve the engagement, Rurina and the main character have to act as if they hate each other for 6 months. Well, upon hearing this, the main character started crying because he doesn't want to treat Rurina badly. She also cries, saying it will be tough for both of them, but she's convinced she wants to do it because she's become really close friends with Takazaki. She knows Takazaki is truly in love with the main character, so her main motivation is to see Takazaki happy when marrying Najima. With things like this, the main character asks what will happen after he and Takazaki get married. Rurina says they'll stop treating each other badly and become friends again. Well, the main character likes this plan better, so they agree to execute Rurina's plan. However, Rurina says that after she annuls her engagement with the main character, she'll have to find a new partner. Since she has no experience, she wouldn't want to mess it up like she did with the main character when they stayed together at the ministry. So, she asks the main character for the favor of practicing a few kisses, mainly so Rurina can gain some experience. The main character agrees to this, so they kissed each other passionately for a while, ending their last day of affection holding hands. A week after this event, Rurina met with Takazaki to go to the modeling agency where they would dress as brides. When Takazaki asked why she didn't come with her wife, Rurina told her they were distant. She began explaining that the reason was to annul the engagement so Najima could marry her. However, before seeing Takazaki's reaction to this, the scene changed, showing the protagonist lying on his bed feeling a bit sad because deep down he missed Rurina. Suddenly, Nasaka visited him, asking why he was lying around like a bum with no motivation. The protagonist decided to tell Nasaka about the deal he made with Rurina. He realized he loves both waifus equally, Rurina and Takazaki. Instead of calling him shameless, Nasaka encouraged him to basically form a harem. Happy with this idea, the protagonist went off to find the waifus, who were already dressed as brides ready for the modeling. Meanwhile, Takazaki expressed her disagreement with the pact Rurina and the protagonist made for Najima to marry her. She echoed Rurina's sentiments about not wanting her to be unhappy because of her. Both waifus liked the same guy but didn't want to keep him because they were close friends. The protagonist proposed forming a harem, but he clumsily fell halfway there. Despite this, he recovered quickly and, though late to the church, took advantage of the waifus being dressed as brides to propose they both marry him. The two shameless ones accepted, leading to the final image of the protagonist with both waifus. By the way, if you want to know more about the protagonist's adventures with his waifus, including whether Nasaka joins the harem, leave triple wedding, in the comments. I'll get to work finding more material about this anime. I heard there are some OVAs too.